I am 73 years old. Late last summer, Linda and I drove downtown to the main branch of our bank to sign some paperwork for a home insurance policy. We parked on the street a block away because the lot was full. I put a quarter in the meter, turned around, and stepped off the curb to cross the asphalt. It was only a 6-inch drop to the street, but the exact second my left boot hit the pavement, the large muscle in my thigh simply vanished. There was absolutely no resistance. The shock of the pavement shot straight up my shin, and my leg buckled completely in half. I pitched forward, throwing my hands out blindly, and slammed my palms and my good knee directly into the dirty street. Linda screamed my name. A younger man in a business suit had to grab me under the armpits and drag me back up onto the concrete sidewalk. I stood there, brushing sharp pieces of gravel out of my bleeding palms, feeling a burning, quiet humiliation deep in my chest. I did not trip over anything. I did not roll my ankle. My legs simply refused to hold the weight of my own body. I spent 3 decades working on the concrete floors of a regional distribution center. I unloaded heavy freight, I climbed steel ladders to check inventory, and I spent 12 hours a day moving my body like it was a piece of heavy machinery. When you live that kind of physical life, you build a quiet arrogance about your own strength. You assume your legs are made of thick iron and that the iron will never rust. When I retired, I naturally sat down a little more often. I rested. I thought I had earned the right to take it easy. Standing on that sidewalk, trying to stop my hands from shaking, I realized I had not earned anything. I was just letting the machinery quietly rust away. My legs had become incredibly hollow, and I was dangerously close to losing the ability to walk down a simple city street without a chaperone. My daughter Megan came over the following Sunday for dinner. She's an occupational therapist. She spends her entire professional life watching older men and women slowly lose their freedom because their bodies can no longer perform the simplest physical tasks. I made the mistake of telling her about my fall downtown, trying to pass it off as a clumsy misstep on a bad piece of asphalt. She did not smile. She put her coffee cup down on the table and told me about a medical paper she had been reading at her clinic. The paper tracked men in their late 60s and 70s, and the data was absolutely terrifying. It showed that an aging man can lose up to 8% of his functional muscle mass every single decade if he does not aggressively fight to keep it. She told me that over 60% of men my age are suffering from severe muscle wasting right now, but they blame their weakness on their joints or just getting older. They do not realize they are literally starving the muscle right off their own skeletons, and the damage is usually coming from the very foods they think are keeping them healthy. I spent the next month treating my own body like a diagnostic project in my garage. I looked at every single habit I had, trying to figure out where the strength was leaking out. I realized that my daily diet, specifically the lunch I was eating almost every single day, was actively destroying the muscle in my legs. I narrowed the problem down to 4 specific things. 3 of them were massive mistakes I was making with the type of bread I was keeping in my kitchen because I believed the health advice marketed to older folks. The 4th thing was one incredibly specific, incredibly dense type of bread I finally started eating every day that stopped the muscle loss cold and put the heavy armor back on my legs. I am going to tell you exactly what all 4 of these things are. We have to talk about the mistakes first, because you cannot fix a broken foundation if you keep pounding the wrong nails into it. The first mistake I had to completely abandon was buying commercial whole wheat bread from the grocery store aisle. For the last several years, I would buy the loaves in the brown plastic bags that promised they were heart healthy and made with whole grains. I thought I was being disciplined. I thought I was keeping my older body lean and protecting my arteries. What I was actually doing was sending my system into a severe catabolic panic every time I ate a sandwich. When you buy that soft commercial wheat bread, the grains have been pulverized into a microscopic dust by industrial steel rollers. When you eat it, your stomach does not even have to work to break it down. It hits your 73-year-old bloodstream like pure liquid syrup. That causes a massive, violent spike in insulin. And what nobody tells you is that a massive insulin spike completely shuts down your body's ability to repair muscle tissue. The insulin creates systemic inflammation that tells your cells to store fat and stop building muscle. You are getting a quick rush of empty energy, but you are giving your legs absolutely zero structural building blocks. I was basically trying to build a brick wall out of wet paper. Megan showed me a clinical study that looked at older adults who consumed pulverized whole wheat flour versus those who consumed unbroken whole foods. The whole wheat group lost their lean muscle mass at an incredibly accelerated rate. Their bodies were constantly inflamed, and their muscles never received the chemical signal required to rebuild after a day of walking. It made me think of a guy from my old neighborhood named Frank. Frank was 75 and obsessed with his heart health. He ate 2 turkey sandwiches on commercial whole wheat bread every single day for lunch. Last summer, I watched him try to walk up the small grassy hill in the local park. His legs were shaking so badly he had to stop halfway up and lean his entire body weight on a tree. His healthy bread had kept him thin, but it had eaten his leg muscles down to the bone. I threw every loaf of commercial wheat bread in my pantry straight into the garbage that afternoon. The second mistake was the habit I had formed of eating dry toast and jam when I was not hungry enough for a real meal. When I did not want to cook, I wanted something easy. I would toast 2 pieces of white or wheat bread, spread a little fruit jam on them, and eat them with a cup of coffee. I thought it was a harmless light snack. I thought it was easy on my older digestive system. I was dead wrong. An older body is incredibly stubborn when it comes to holding on to muscle. It requires a heavy, immediate supply of complex amino acids to repair the wear and tear from the day before. When you eat a piece of toast with jam, you are giving your stomach something to do, but you are giving your muscles nothing to work with. Because the body still needs protein to operate the vital organs, it goes looking for it. It releases stress hormones and starts pulling emergency energy directly from your own muscle tissue. I was literally forcing my body to cannibalize the muscle in my own thighs just to process the empty starch I had put in my stomach. I found a research trial that compared older men consuming carbohydrate-heavy snacks versus dense protein meals. The men eating the empty carbohydrates continued to lose strength in their legs month after month. Their bodies were essentially eating themselves. I realized I was chewing on food, but the construction site inside my body remained completely shut down. My brother-in-law Gary fell into this exact trap. He started eating nothing but toast and tea every morning because his doctor told him to watch his cholesterol. Last winter he lost his balance trying to get out of the bathtub. His legs simply gave out because the muscle had vanished. He ended up fracturing his wrist trying to catch himself on the porcelain. His light snack cost him his mobility. I stopped eating toast as a meal replacement immediately. The third mistake was trusting the expensive modern health food Linda started bringing home. She saw a segment on a morning television show about inflammation and started buying loaves of gluten-free bread from the specialty aisle. The packaging looked incredibly healthy. It promised it was better for the gut and better for the joints. I started making my lunches with it, thinking I was finally giving my body the modern medicine it needed to stay strong. I was actually wasting my money and quietly starving my legs faster than ever before. What nobody tells you about that expensive gluten-free commercial bread is that it is essentially culinary spackle. To make bread hold together without gluten, the factories use tapioca starch, potato starch, rice flour, and heavy industrial seed oils. It is a brick of pure empty carbohydrates with absolutely zero protein value. When an older man eats that, he is getting no amino acids whatsoever. Gluten is simply a protein, and while some folks are genuinely allergic to it, for the rest of us, removing it and replacing it with potato starch is a recipe for physical disaster. I was eating a sandwich that my muscles could not even use to repair a single microscopic tear. I read a paper from a sports science university that tracked men over 65 who switched to heavily processed gluten-free substitutes versus those who ate heavy natural proteins. The men eating the gluten-free starches saw a massive drop in their functional leg strength. They were eating their expensive bread while their muscles continued to shrink from protein starvation. A friend of mine from the hardware store, a retired carpenter named Thomas, made this mistake. He went completely gluten-free to help his arthritis. He ate that starchy bread every day for 3 years. He still ended up needing a walker to navigate his own living room because the muscle in his calves and thighs completely wasted away. The diet might have helped his knuckles, but it let his legs vanish. I took that expensive loaf of gluten-free starch and threw it in the trash bin outside. Taking away the commercial wheat, the empty toast, and the useless gluten-free starch stopped the aggressive damage. I had stopped poisoning the environment, but my legs still felt incredibly hollow and weak. I still did not trust my own balance on the sidewalk. I needed to figure out what my body was actually begging for at lunchtime. I needed a specific, powerful material that could rebuild the foundation without forcing me to cook a steak in the middle of the afternoon. That is when I found the fourth thing on this list, the single specific bread that changed everything for me. I went to the frozen section of a local health market and bought a loaf of genuine flourless sprouted grain bread. I'm not talking about the brown bread in the regular aisle. I'm talking about the heavy frozen bricks of bread made from sprouted wheat, barley, lentils, soybeans, and spelt, the kind you have to keep cold because it is actually alive. I realized that my older body needed an aggressive, immediate dose of complete amino acids to force the muscles to stop shrinking, and sprouted grain bread is an entirely different biological entity than regular bread. When you take a grain and a legume, soak them in water, and allow them to sprout before baking them, a chemical miracle happens. The sprouting process destroys the phytic acid, which is the anti-nutrient that usually blocks your body from absorbing minerals. More importantly, the sprouting process unlocks the amino acids inside the plant. When you bake sprouted grains and legumes together, they form a dense, heavy, complete protein profile that rivals a piece of meat. It contains high levels of lysine and leucine. Leucine is the specific spark plug required to turn on the engine of muscle growth in an aging body. Because there is no pulverized flour in the bread, it digests incredibly slowly. It does not spike your insulin. It acts like a slow, steady intravenous drip of heavy building blocks fed directly into your leg muscles. I read a staggering study that looked specifically at older men consuming sprouted grain and legume combinations versus those eating standard commercial breads. The results were undeniable. The men eating the sprouted grains completely stopped their muscle wasting. Their bodies grabbed that dense, complete amino acid profile and aggressively repaired the muscle fibers in their legs. They were feeding their bodies the exact raw materials needed to pour fresh concrete and reinforce the foundation. I was absolutely floored. I had been eating empty flour and useless starch for years when I could have been giving my legs the exact biological key they needed to survive. I did not wait around. The very next day, I took 2 heavy slices of that frozen sprouted bread, put them in the toaster until they were hot and crisp, spread a thick layer of real, full-fat butter on them, and ate them for lunch. I did it the next day and the day after that. It was incredibly filling. It felt like eating a real meal, and it completely changed the chemical environment inside my body. The change was not magic. You do not rebuild a decade of lost muscle in a single week. But about 2 months after I threw away the commercial wheat and started eating that sprouted grain bread every day, Linda asked me to drive her back downtown to that same bank to drop off some additional forms. I parked in the exact same spot on the street. I put a quarter in the meter. I turned around, walked to the edge of the curb, and stepped off onto the asphalt. I did not hesitate. I did not brace myself. I just stepped down. My left boot hit the street, my thigh muscle fired instantly, and my leg caught my entire body weight without a single tremble or shift in balance. I stood there in the street, feeling the solid, unforgiving asphalt under my boots, and I realized the weakness was completely gone. The hollow feeling in my thighs had vanished. The heavy armor was holding. When you get to be my age, the things that matter are incredibly simple. If your legs go, your freedom goes right out the door with them. You become a prisoner in your own house. Muscle does not just vanish because the calendar turns over. It goes when you stop giving it a reason to stay, and it goes when you starve it of the complete, heavy building blocks it needs to survive. You do not have to watch your world shrink. You do not have to accept that stepping off a city curb is going to be a terrifying, dangerous experience for the rest of your life. You just have to be willing to look at what you are putting on your plate and have the courage to put the right fuel in the engine. I'm going to head out to the garage now. Derek is bringing his truck over, and we have to pull a heavy piece of machinery out of the bed. My legs are going to carry my weight, and they are going to hold me steady while I lift that steel. Take care of your body, feed it the heavy materials it actually needs, and do not let anyone tell you that weakness is just an inevitable part of the deal. I will be right here if you want to talk again.